Morning, everybody. So I was out doing my walk this morning. I hear a Wilmer, and I was looking at all the trucks and the Cascadias and the Kenworths, and of course my truck, which is the Peterbilt. And I was thinking, these trucks have come a long way over the years. We sometimes complain about truck repairs. Here it is, year 2026. But if I look back, when I first started driving in 2016, my first truck as an owner operator, it was a 2012 Freightliner Cascadia. I would have, at that time, I would have loved to have a truck nowadays that comes with warranties, better built, better features, all these things. I mean, it's 10 years later, but the trucks nowadays I would have loved to have had 10 years ago. Even a Freightliner Cascadia, if I had a better one, that's like a 2020, 2026 or 2024. If I had that 10 years ago when I started, my business would be so much better. Because those old trucks, like mine was EPA 10 for like first generation of NOx and DEF and stuff like that. And those systems were incredibly unreliable. I replaced that DEF system twice in that 2012, and I replaced the one box, for example. And that costs a lot of money. And I'm thinking, well, if at the time I started in 2016, if I had better equipment, where would I be financially, because of that? Compare and contrast what I had at the time to what I have currently. And I would think that my savings, had I had better equipment with warranty back then that you have nowadays, my savings right now would be north of $300,000, maybe even as high as $500,000. And so the impact is enormous. You don't think it's that big of a deal, but back then it was a big deal. Back then it was a matter of survival. Were you able to stay in business? Did you have the mechanical skills to keep your truck on the road? Nowadays with these modern warranties, the new owner operators have it so much better. You don't even have to be mechanically inclined, because the trucks have warranties. They're better trucks. I harp on the Cascadia, but even the newer Cascadia 126 models, which is a much better truck than what I had when I first started out. And that matters because over the years, the costs accumulate. So and say, for example, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 4 or 5 year period, you're putting 20, 30 grand back into the truck to keep it on the road. What if you could cut those costs in half? Over that same 5 year period, you could have had additional $50,000 savings that you could have put in your investment and had the benefit of compound interest. So here it is 10 years later, and I'm just now starting to have financial success. And am I doing anything different? Am I driving different miles? Am I more productive, more efficient? No. I'm driving as I always have driven. So me as a driver is not a variable that changed. I'm still the same driver I was 10 years ago. So what's changed? Well, the equipment's changed. So that's the key to having success long term as an owner operator, is having the best equipment you can afford. That's why Scott buys brand new trucks. And I talked to a lot of guys who failed as an owner operator, and by and large, the ones who failed had old crappy trucks that ate them up for maintenance and repairs. These guys would buy cheap trucks for 20, 30 grand, think they're going to become millionaires. They bought a truck, but the truck already had 6, 7, 800,000 miles on it. it takes all their profit. So they actually go in the hole. I was talking to a driver yesterday at Peterbilt, and this guy wasn't the smartest light bulb in the pack. Let's just say that. you know, but he's running a 2016, and that truck is over 1 million miles, and he's always going into the repair shop. And I said, well, why don't you buy something newer? He's like, well, there's nothing wrong with that truck. Well, evidently you can't keep it on the road, so there is something wrong with that truck. It's too freaking old. But he doesn't want to buy newer equipment. I'm like, well, this is what you get when you run older equipment. You have the cost of the breakdown plus the cost of downtime. You didn't make any money sitting at the dealership. So yeah, you don't have a truck payment, but for what you're paying for truck repairs, you could have bought a nicer, newer truck and made some money. But you couldn't convince him otherwise. And I've been there. I've been there with my first truck. Was 2012. Guys would tell me all the time, you need to buy another truck. And I was stubborn. I didn't want to. And then once I did, I got into a 2019, and then my business became profitable. That truck came with a warranty. I ran 2 years of that truck before going on medical leave. I would have been nicer to run another year in that truck, because then my savings would have grown significantly. But the impact of having good, reliable equipment is the key to owner-operator success. There's a lot of company drivers who are excellent drivers, but they're driving brand new equipment. So being a good driver is not what's going to make you successful as an owner-operator. By and large, your success is going to come down to the quality of the equipment you're running. So I firmly believe that 600,000 miles is enough for me and my small business. I don't want to go above that on any piece of equipment. Scott, who buys brand new equipment, he won't go past the warranty. And then I know other guys who go way past the warranty, but for me, I'm trying to strike that balance of, okay, I could buy low mileage used equipment, but get rid of it before 600,000 miles. So I bought this Peterbilt at 350,000 miles. I'm approaching 400,000 miles. So I probably would drive it for 2 more years, and then I'd be looking to trade it in and get another one. It's just that once you're above 600,000 miles, then, components need to be replaced. Fuel pumps, water pumps, turbos. You start having after treatment system problems, and all that stuff just eats into your profit, and it takes away from your uptime, and it creates downtime. Downtime could be just as expensive as the repair itself. So this is something you have to keep in mind, is that your success as an owner-operator doesn't depend on your ability to drive. It depends on your ability to control costs. And one of your largest costs is maintenance and repair. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.